Welcome back, Java fans. I'm excited to spend another time with you here going over the fundamentals of object oriented programming and Java programming language. After starting off really diving into some object oriented theory and making classes, we have kind of taken a brief break to study just a little bit of the syntax that goes along with Java. We know that in any computer programming language, we're going to have ways to control program flow. And we do that with if statements and with loops, amongst other things. So we've already studied if statements. Let's take a look at a type of loop today. I want to look at the for loop. So I've just in this simple programs project that we made last time, and I am just going to make a method called run that we can use to just try out a few things. So this is not a very useful class for describing things. It's just an application class with one method called run. Remember that in Java, they require object-oriented programming. So even if we're just trying to do some simple little code snippets, it has to be in a class, and those code snippets have to be inside a method. So that's what we've got here. All right, so here's how the for loop works. You start with the word for, and I want to put a space after the R, because if you do this, it looks like you're calling a method. And so we want to make sure that for is a keyword, and so we keep spaces after our keywords. And then there's going to be three parts here that we're going to do. We're going to create a variable, we're going to check a variable, we're going to change a variable. All right? So first we create a variable, and I have to declare it with the type. Typically in a for loop, it needs to be an integer. So int, and I'm going to say I for iteration, and I'll start it at 0. And then, like all statements, I close it with a semicolon. So you can see we're used to calling methods where we put different arguments separated by commas, but we need to understand this parenthesis is not about calling a method. I wish they used something else, but that's what they use. That's why it's good to put a space there so you know that's not what this is. All right, next we're going to check the variable. So the check variable is saying how long do I want to loop for? Loop for as long as this is true. So I'm going to say I less than 10. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the variable. And I'm going to use I plus plus. So lots to unpack here. So Java gives us a couple of different ways to change our variables. We can, let me just, come out here for just a second. If I've got a variable x equals 0, I can increase x by saying this. So I could say, remember the equal sign is assignment and it happens last. So if I have int x equals 0, and then on another line I say x, and we should read this as gets, x gets assigned x plus 1. Well, the x plus 1 will be done first. So the 0 will go in here for x, and we'll have 0 plus 1, which is 1. Then last, I assign that to x. So that would make x go up by 1. Alternatively, we can use this symbol. All these symbols you probably remember from Python. Plus equals. There's also minus equals, divide equals, times equals, mod equals. They're all there. Please note that the equal sign comes after it. It means increase x by 1 and then assign that to the new x. So that's a nice variable. Java also allows us to use plus plus or minus minus. That's only for increasing by 1 or decreasing by 1. So I use the I plus plus in my for loop. So we have these three parts, but they're all going to be run a different amount of times. So this part here will be run one time only. That's the creation of the variable. It will be run once, and then it will never happen again. It could loop a million times. Int I equals 0. That first part in front of the semicolon where you create a variable will only happen once. So it's not going to recreate it over and over again. If it did, then I would keep going back to 0. So that's where we create the variable. This is the check condition. It will be run every single time before we do the code in these curly braces. So it will be run every time until it is false. It will be false at least once. Once it's false one time, it will stop. Okay? It will stop the code. This here, the I++, is going to run after that curly brace ends. So let's use a system.out.println, and let's print out. So print line is going to print on different lines. If I want to print these on the same line, I can say print and then maybe add a quote. But I'll just go ahead, instead of separating by space, I'll add the LN to make it print the number and move down. All right, let's compile and make an instance, and we'll run it. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's talk about why that happened that way. First, I is 0. That's the first thing. We create, we check, then we change. So I create, I equals 0. I check, is 0 less than 10? That is true. Because of that, it will do system.out.println I and print a 0. Then, only after it runs the code in the parentheses, does it I++, and we go back to here. Is 1 less than 10? Yes. So I print it. I print a 1, then I++. So it's check, code, then change. All right? And I think you can see how that is. Notice how many numbers we had printed here. We have 10 digits, 0 through 9. So although we stopped right before the 10, this 0 through 9 is actually 10 digits. So if you want to do something 10 times, keep a counter at start a counter at 0, loop while it's less than the amount you want to do something, and then print it out. So we could write a method. Okay, we could say public, how about public void print x times. And so I'm going to take in a string for words and an int for times to say it. Okay? And so for this one, we're going to say for int I equals 0, I less than times, I++, system.out.println words. So now I've got a method that will print whatever I want, however many times I wanted to do it. One thing I wanted to point out, if I was to go here after the for loop, what would this do? I know I'm jumping back. We moved on to the method, but I meant to say this earlier. I want to point this out, what's going to happen. You're going to get an error in Java because any variable I create here is destroyed at the end of the method. Some programming languages have it continue existing, not Java. So Java's rule is wherever curly braces you declare your variable in, that's as long as it lives. So this is declared in these parentheses, so it only exists in these curly braces. All right, clearing. Let me clear that out so it'll compile. All right. So let's go to our code and make a new app. And let's run it. So I'm going to do print x times. So I'm going to say CS is cool. And I want to print it 73 times. Woo! You can count that if you want. Actually, I think BlueJay might start removing stuff from the background, so probably should do that again if I really want to verify that it worked. Oh, I just ran the old one. I'm going to print hi 4 times. By the way, if yours is showing previous runs of print, you can turn on clear screen at method call or just leave it that way. It's up to you. I like to have it clear every time. Okay? But sometimes I turn it off depending on what I need it for. All right, so that is kind of like a for loop. Let's do another one. So let's just use this run loop again, and I'm going to say for int I equals 20, I greater than or equal to 0, I minus minus. And I keep using I. I want you to know I don't have to use I. Maybe I should change it. Let me change it to X. And I don't even have to use single letters. I can use words. I can use whatever I want. It's just these are just simple little variable names. And I'm going to print out X, and I'm going to print it out and separate it with the space. So let's try that. So keep your mind focused on what this is going to do. What is it going to do? Where will X start? How long will this loop run? How will we change X? As you can see, we start at 20 and go all the way down to 0. Because I create the variable x equals 20, we run that line of code gets run one time at the beginning of the for loop. And that x only exists in this little purple box here, because then it's thrown away. I will continue running the loop as long as x is greater than or equal to 0. You can tell that we actually did include the 0 because they have greater than or equal to. So we run that code, and then x is decreased by 1, and it's going to continue to count down. Be careful about things like this. If you're using x, if you're counting down, be sure you do x minus minus, or else you're going to get an infinite loop and have to stop your program manually. All right, we could also do something like 256, and I am going to run this while x is greater than 0, and I'm going to do x divide equals 2. So I don't just have to have plus, plus, or minus, minus. I'm going to have this divide equals operator. I could also have x equals x divided by 2. So what this is going to do is continue to integer divide by 2. And it's going to happen. 256 will divide by 2, and then I'll divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2. Now, if these were real number divisions, x would always be greater than 0. But it's not real number division. It is integer division. So once x is 1, when we divide 1 by 2, we'll get 0 for a quotient. And there we go. 256, 128, 64, 32, 16, 8, 4, 2, 1. So that is the for loop. I'm going to have you practice that, and then our next lesson we'll look at another kind of loop, and then we'll get back into some object-oriented programming ideas. Until I see you again, take care.